the population do things. Okay. So timing is very, very, very important for these different stories that are going to try to weave together for today. Now we start. Why are we not going here? Oh, there we go. Yeah, but that shouldn't be required. There we go. Yeah. Okay. We start with a couple of words that are important for general biological understanding that are not common words on the street. One of them is called iteroparous, which this is what oak trees, squirrels, and you, and many other species do, which means, as in the word iterative, iteroparous means that you have offspring now, and then you wait for a while, and then you have another offspring, and then you wait for a while, and you have another offspring, and then you wait for a while. In other words, the birth is spread out over years, over long periods of time, usually years. The other word is semelparous. Semelparous is not what you do. Semelparous is that you grow until you're some level of an adult, and then you reproduce everything, one shot, done, and you die. Salmon are a fish that does this. The 13 and 17-year cicadas are insects that do this and are feeding on the roots underneath your campus right now. And bamboo does this as well. And other species of animals and plants on the planet also do this. But it's not the common way. The common way is iteroparous, but semelparous produces a very interesting phenomenon where it occurs. Now, the phenomenon of semelparous reproduction is strongly related to the word predator satiation, because what you're really doing is evolution has taken it such that all the organisms, all the adults in a population reproduce at one time. So that produces an enormous number of kids, of offspring, right at that time, and it fills all the predators. They say all the predators just get stuffed full. They can't eat anymore, which means that all the other kids go free. Okay, so that's what's driving it. The common word in some places for this phenomenon is massed fruiting, because the old European English word for enormous numbers of acorns produced in certain years by iteroparous trees who are synchronized was called massed. That's what you turn your pigs loose, your cattle loose into the forest to eat enormous quantities of acorns. And so it was called massed fruiting. But we'll come back to that in a bit here. Anyway, let's start out with the real world. And this is a photograph that you can't ever see. This is a photograph from the 1920s, taken in East Africa, and from an airplane, obviously. And every animal in that photograph is the same species. This phenomenon of enormous numbers of them grouping together and moving at one time in the year can no longer be seen because the enormous numbers no longer exist. In other words, this is what the world was like, right? And today, what you see, they're called wildebeest. This is what they look like today. Little groups here, small groups there, which may coalesce into, say, 1,000 or 5,000 in one place. And that's viewed today as spectacular. But in 1920 and before that, we're talking millions of them. Not only will they aggregate together in one group, but they all drop their calves at the same time. So that the world is wall to wall wildebeest calves at that one little short period of time. But they don't die. The adults don't die. They have a calf in April, May, in the spring when the rains are coming, and turn all the vegetation green, so there's a lot of food for the calf as well as food for the mother to make milk. And so the outcome of this is that you get extreme predator satiation for the lions, for the hyenas, for any other kind of hunting dogs, any other kind of animals who would eat the very weak, very small, very naive wildebeest calves. But of course, simultaneously, this selects for the adults to be very synchronized in the production of their kids, because the ones who are out of synchrony, just a little early, just a little late, have got a large quantity of very hungry predators right there to eat them. So they're very strongly selected for being peaked in the reproduction during the year. But again, this is interoperous because adults don't die, okay? But it is predator satiation. Salmon are real semelparous. They swim upstream from the stream in which they were born at a certain time of the year, in the spring usually, and lay enormous quantities of eggs. The males dump their sperm into the water by the female dumping her eggs. This produces an enormous number of baby salmon, little called fingerlings, very small juvenile salmon. The adults die. So the stream is now choked with dead adult salmon. These little guys then migrate back to the ocean, feeding along the way, and obviously only a portion of them make it to the ocean, but those that make it to the ocean live at least 3 years in the ocean growing up, being predators in the ocean, and of course being food for otters and seals and sea lions and all the other kinds of marine predators. But they're growing up to become big salmon. And once they're full grown, they migrate back to the actual stream, that from the ocean back to the actual freshwater stream that they were born in, and repeat this process. They are semelparous. They die after reproducing. Underneath you on campus right now, on the roots of the trees, are these cicadas, which are sucking sap from the roots. Now, sap in roots is very low in food quality, so it's going to take a long time. So these insects that you see here, which are about 1.5 inches long, just molted from their, let me get my pointer here again. This is the nymph, which was underground, sucking sap out of the roots. After 13 or 17 years, synchronously, these all come up to the surface, climb up on something like these maple leaves on campus. This is a photograph I took on the campus. Hang there and molt to an adult. These are the adults, which are at this point totally helpless. So anybody can eat them. Anybody can eat them. When they harden up and can fly and are full adult insects, they still don't bother to try to escape. You walk right up and pick it off the leaf. They're bright red and black. So they're not only not trying to escape from you, but they're not cryptic. They're not hidden. And they all sing, the males sing like crazy. The females mate with those males, they lay their eggs, and they all die. Males and females. So what they're doing again is predator satiation. And everybody eats cicadas when this happens. And there's 2 species, one that's on 13-year cycle and the other on a 17-year cycle. And again, just like the wildebeest, if the cicada comes out the year before or the year after, obviously it's going to get hit and eaten by birds or by mammals. But in the year that they're there are literally millions and millions and millions in the forest. We're talking here thousands of kilos of insect mass available for food, and everybody fills up on them. Mayflies, this guy right here, was a nymph underwater, in the stream, filter feeding in the stream, in this case, northern Minnesota. And this species takes 3 years to grow as a juvenile, and then all come out the same night of the same year. And it's a full moon night, so that's the trigger. And it's got to do also with the temperature exactly on that particular day. And this is a photograph I took when I was in high school. I parked my car on this bridge over a little stream in northern Minnesota. All of these insects, hundreds of pounds of insects, are the same species of mayfly. This thing right here. They live one night. They mate, they lay their eggs, and they die. But most of them will have been eaten by birds, by fish, by raccoons, by bears. Everybody eats mayflies because this is just neutral pablum hamburger. High quality food in great bulk. As you can see, the bulk, I was probably parked on the bridge 15 minutes. And these were attracted to the lights of my car. To give you an idea of how many were coming out of that stream. You can no longer see this today. This was in the 1960s. You could go to northern Minnesota and park your car on that same bridge, and there might be a couple of hundred come to the headlights of your car. It's because the streams have been thoroughly contaminated with pesticides, with erosion from farmers' fields, and all this has trashed the life for the nymphs in the stream. So the species is still there, but its density is very, very low. The same thing is going to happen to these things. The same thing is already happened to the salmon. In other words, the salmon runs that used to occur in the streams, or the enormous numbers of eggs, enormous numbers of dead adults, those things are all reduced very strongly by putting dams across rivers, which blocks the flow of the fish up the river. And so these are things that you really can't see, even though today you can still see them, 1,000 salmon in a river or a stream. And you think, wow, look at how many there are. But in the 1800s, the numbers that were there were you could walk across the back of the salmon to walk across the river. I mean, there's just enormous quantities of them. Now, let's focus here on one group of things that I personally have more experience with. We're here in southern Costa Rica, farmhouse here. And right here is this big green clump. That's a bamboo from Southeast Asia, more specifically from South China. Okay. This is what it looks like inside. What these really are is huge grass stems. Okay, that's what, about 3 inches in diameter, but it's a woody grass. So what we know from the records in Japanese and Chinese temples is that sometime in about the year 500 or 800, something like that, somebody brought a sack of bamboo seeds, of this species of bamboo seeds, from China to Japan. And it was well known, apparently, at that time as a very, very valuable construction timber. So they planted it, and it grows for 150 years without reproducing. So they kept records of those 150-year intervals because it was very important, because when it reproduces, it dies. So that means that if you have a society based on heavy use of bamboo, suddenly at 150-year intervals, you don't have any. And furthermore, it takes a while for the seedlings to grow up to be big construction timber again. Okay. We'll come back to that point in a short bit here. But that's what I mean by construction. This is in Taiwan, photograph I took on the edge of the coast, and this is all the construction materials that you see here are actually bamboo, not what you would see here in the United States. And not only are the construction materials bamboo, but you see this, the equivalent of steel wire that would bound them together is in fact thin strips of bamboo bark. So you're making all the construction process out of this kind of tree. Now, as I said before, this is Taiwan. Now, the Taiwanese reaction to the fact that these trees wait 150 years to reproduce, I mean, to die and then reproduce, or at the same time reproduce, they went around the world and got different species of bamboos, which have different periods of time. 7 years, 10 years, 15 years, 12 years, 35 years, 32 years. And they brought clumps of those to Taiwan and planted them all over Taiwan. So in practically every year, there's different bamboo material that you can use if you know which clump is going to fruit and die at which years. So what they did was they solved this problem by bringing in many different species and different clones. So a clone of bamboo of the same species on the same cycle of 35 years, let's just say, there can be two different clones, one in southern Malaya and the other one in South China, which are 150 years or 35 years, whatever the time gap is, but not synchronized with each other. They're synchronized at the place where they are, but not with the ones in another country or another place. So here's what our bamboo clump looks like normally. This is how a mouse sees when he's inside a field of grass, right? Looking up, because that's all, that's just big woody grass. This is it. See, that's the living, photosynthesizing, and there it is, dead. And all that grayish, yellowish color there is flowers. This is a bamboo clump in Panama, which is on a 150-year cycle. And the seeds for that were brought from Japan by Europeans and planted in Panama. At the same time, they were planted in Alabama, in North Africa, in Kew Gardens in Europe, in the UK, and probably other places. And they all are synchronized and fruiting on the same 150-year cycle. In other words, whatever you do to this plant, it's got an internal calendar and it keeps track. So it grows for 150 years, wherever it is. And then flowers. Here are the flowers like that. And there's the seeds all over the ground. And you can see the dead leaves here from the parent plant. So the ground is covered with dead leaves and bamboo seeds, which are all these things, which are effectively rice grains. It's a grass. Now, there are some species who have very big grass seeds. This can be as big as a lemon, big as a pear, or it can be all sizes below that. In other words, some bamboo species make a moderate number of very large kids. Others make an enormous number of very small kids. But the simple point is they're all doing the same thing. Okay. Then it grows into a big patch of juveniles. So here's a patch of those 150-year-old in Panama. And this is all, in that photograph are probably, I don't know, 100, 200 individual seedlings. So maybe more than that from all those different grass seeds. They all germinate immediately, just like rice seeds do, just like wheat seeds do. They don't go dormant. So they're all synchronized now in their germination time. So this seedling here is recording year 1 for itself, or maybe this is year 2. I don't remember at the time. A few years later, it looks like this. So there's a person over here for scale, and there it is about 5 feet tall, something like that. Again, this is a very large number of individuals, all of that same species, all from those seedlings. Now here it is bigger. Now at this point, we jump to, this is a different species, which has the same biology, but this one only uses 7 years between fruiting. So it's getting up there where it's nice adult now. And if we go inside of this clump, this is what it looks like. So here, now we look through here, and let's just say in this photograph, initially, there were perhaps 500 seedlings, maybe more than that. in what you see in this photograph. Today, after 7 years, 6 years of competition, before these guys had to become adults like this, probably there's no more than about 5 or 6 individuals in that photograph, because each one sprouts multiple stems. So whoever's the best competitor ends up owning some piece of that terrain. So here we are with the multiple stems. You see, and here's a new stem coming up right over here. So here's the stem here, new stem there, an older stem up here already, another one, an older one before here. You go down through here, and you get to another one. You go over here is another one, over here is another one. So all these in this photograph could easily be the single individual who somehow competitively won that site. You can now rip those out of the ground like this. This is a different species. Yeah, this is a 15-year species. It doesn't matter. Also in Costa Rica in this case. And take each of these pieces now and put them all over the world and plant them. And they'll all flower and fruit, and produce seeds at the same time, no matter where you put them. Now, people were very puzzled by this for a long time, and what they, of course, wanted to do was break this cycle so that you could have valuable bamboo stems at any year, not this intervals thing. So they tried all kinds of things, plowing, burning, cutting, to see if you could break the cycle. This is a power line in Costa Rica that has been burned, and this was a solid stand of bamboo here. They burned the power line. So there's all the charcoal and this is a very severe treatment. Killed a lot of the plants, would have damaged many others along the edge. You can see here's the bamboo over here on the edge here, and the bamboo here. A couple of years later, it looks like this. Beautiful green patch. It just grows right back up in there, and the stems go out underground, grow up through that. And these individuals, when they flowered, 15 years after whenever it was they flowered before, they all flowered at the same time, despite the fact that they got all that damage. And but the ones in the sun out here look like this, a lot of leaves, and they made a lot of seeds. Back here, the ones in the shade underneath these trees, same species of bamboo. When they flowered, they've developed at the same time, but these back in here made very small numbers of seeds. So you can see what happens is that if you've got predators in the system, the seed predators, the birds, the mice, all these guys will get the seeds which are back here in the shade, get proportionally more of those than the great mass of seeds that's out here. So what that does is it selects for the growing plants to be primarily in the sun and not do so well in the shade. Now, I'm in Malaysia many years ago, looking at insects in a national park, and I stopped at this little roadside restaurant to buy lunch. I sat down at this table, and I'm busy eating my lunch, and I looked down, and here's this chicken. He walked right up to me like this, and he was picking up something off the ground. And so the owner was standing right over here, and I said, where's the farm? Because I'm in a national park, right? But here's a chicken. So first I thought maybe the chicken belonged to him, but there was no sign of poultry or anything like that with this little restaurant on the side of the road. So I said, where's the farm? Figuring that this chicken must have come from a farm somewhere. And he said, no, that's a wild bird. I said, what do you mean? That's a chicken. He says, no, that's a wild bird. He lives in the forest. And he comes out of the forest looking for food. And that's what you're seeing him do here. So we had a little discussion about this, and that really startled and puzzled me, because in my mindset, chickens go with farms and chickens go with North America or South America, Central America today. That's what my mindset was at that time. And this got more puzzling to me and more puzzling to me. And then I was in the San Diego Zoo, and look at this. These are wild chickens from Malaysia. And what you see are the hens and one male. That's his group of females. And he'll fight to the death to protect them from some other male. Okay? So that he's the owner of that little group, or he tries to be the owner of that little group. Notice that they're not differently colored. They're all gray-brown colored. So I started poking more at the biology of these things, and I think many of you have heard or know about the fact that roosters crow in the morning in the barnyard. Cock-a-doodle-doo, very early in the morning. What it puts together is this guy, 3 o'clock in the morning, in the rainforest, goes up to a tall tree, stands on the top of the tree, and crows very loudly. And what he's saying to the other groups of chickens in the forest is, this is where I am, and this is where my harem is, and I am right here, and I'll beat up anybody who tries to come over here. And another one, a kilometer away, does the same thing. And another one over there does the same thing. So this goes on year after year, day after day through the year, and year after year. And all that time, you have the Iowa farmyard, and something notices right away. Or this is Costa Rica in this case, but it looks just like Iowa, except there's this palm tree out here. There's a rooster. There's another rooster. And there's a third one in here somewhere with its head down. I can't pick him out, but there were 3 roosters in this cluster of hens. And none of these 3 roosters are fighting with each other. That began to make a puzzle for me. We have these forest animals, very aggressive, very territorial, barnyard animals, roosters together, but they still get up early in the morning and crow. So what is actually happening? What's actually happening is, in nature, when the jungle fowl, the animal this is the native homeland of these animals. That's their native land. When he calls in the morning, if the one who usually calls to him from a kilometer away does not answer, he comes down and goes right to where that one was calling from. Because if a predator got him, he gets the females that went with him and joins his group. So he now has more. But if nobody is there, no females and no males, then he goes in the same direction. And the next morning, he calls. And again, he doesn't hear anybody from that direction. So he goes in that direction. The outcome of this is that the entire forest contributes groups of chickens to a bamboo seed crop. This is nothing more than a bamboo seed crop put down by a farmer, corn and rice. When they get to that group, the males don't fight with each other. They all inseminate the females, and the females all produce big clutches, 6, 8, 10, 12 eggs. The kids all grow up right there eating bamboo seeds. And there can be literally tens of thousands of chickens in one spot for a year. Right along with them is this. Now notice, there's the chicken. And what are these? Frontier pigs. This is a Mexican pig that I knew very well, lived next door to me. And you can see his ribs, very, very thin. And he lives on little bits of grass, scraps from the kitchen, hapless mouse or bird that he happens to catch. He's an omnivore, he's like you are, he eats everything. But he's just barely making it. Give him a bamboo seed crop, and he turns into that. He can put on 10 centimeters of fat in a month. And when he does, or she, either way, they store enormous quantities of grain by fat inside themselves. Okay, so when the Iowa farmer makes pigs for bacon and all these kinds of things, all he's really doing is mimicking a bamboo seed crop in the biology of this animal. This animal has the largest litters of any mammal on the planet. And the beautiful thing about this is the kids have to grow up on milk and grain. Mom cannot make enough milk to mature this group of kids, because she's only going to do that when there's a superabundance of food available, i.e. a bamboo seed crop. So the outcome is that when the bamboo seed crop ends, all the forest pigs migrate to the bamboo seed crop, just like the chickens did. And you get this phenomenon. So really what this pig, this is a Costa Rican pig, but what it's doing really genetically, this is turned on, its genome is turned on as though it had found a bamboo seed crop. And so it makes a very large number of small pigs, and in 3 lousy months, they can be old enough to start reproducing. In other words, they can grow very fast, just like the chickens can. Chickens can get off at least 1 generation, if not 2 generations, before the entire bamboo seed crop is eaten. This is the wild pig. This is in Malaysia. And I was not allowed to get close enough to take any more pictures, but the point being that it just looks like any other ordinary pig except it's hairier. But these guys were stimulated by not only bamboo seed crops, but other forest synchronized tree crops called Dipterocarpaceae, could occur in groups of, say, 1,000, all moving together in one big seed crop and become very, very chubby. And of course, very heavily hunted by predators and by people. And then of course, they can live for months on the stored fat by going from one seed crop to another seed crop. Now, this is a person standing over for scale. This is a wild pig nest. This is, you can maybe see it a little better this way in a flash. The mother pig has gone out and collected each one of these stems by going up to the stem, literally breaking it off with her mouth, bringing it back and building a nest by making a big pile. She then burrows underneath this and stands up and makes a cave underneath it. And she has her kids in the cave, because the kids, this very large number of very small and very weak kids, don't have enough body fat, enough resources to tolerate the cold weather at the time at night, at the time that their mom has the kids. So she has to make a nest for them. That shows how weak they are. Now, this is not true for other mammals in the rainforest. They can have the kids sleep on the ground and all this kind of stuff. But the whole point being is that these are very poorly developed children at the time of birth. And she's counting on there being a big seed crop available there for her. Now, this is from the 1500s. It's a painting of a wall in a Dutch museum. And I don't know the meaning of many of the things in this painting. Some people would know them. I don't. What I see is it's a very decrepit farmhouse with holes in the roof up here, and people not doing very well. But what struck me was, and this was true of other paintings at the same time, there's a cow, there's a dog, mama pig and piglets. No chickens. In the same museum were a large number of things that had pigs, ducks, geese. No chickens. No chickens at all. So this is part of the general archaeologist, anthropologist myth that chickens came from China to Europe about Marco Polo's time and became part of European life and then our life here from that process. Pigs, ducks, geese go way back before that. Okay. Cattle as well go way back before that. That's what I grew up with. That sort of, I'm going to call it almost really, I should say, a myth now. I mean, it's not really a myth. It's true. It was brought, whether it was Marco Polo or other traders at that time, it brought chickens. That's not clear. But the point is that they did not arrive until quite late in the system. Well, two things happen. One is I'm walking through a zoo in China and discover in the zoo, in the Chinese zoo, a large number of cages with different varieties of chickens. And on the wall, an enormous tree, enormous phylogenetic tree showing the relationship of these very different varieties of chickens. And it starts way back. Okay, I've forgotten how far we're talking, 1,000 years or earlier. And there's a branch that goes right out into Polynesia. Some anthropologists working in South America, dating bones in refuse heaps in Peru and Ecuador, discovered that the Inca Indians had chickens way before the Spaniards ever got there. But the Spaniards, soldiers, got there and said back home, they have chickens. And everybody thought the soldiers were so illiterate that they were talking about something else. So it was decided that the New World Indians did not have chickens. Well, it turns out South America was full of chickens, but they came from Polynesia, not by the Europeans. Now, there's a lot of discussion about the transfer of agricultural crops across the Pacific from Polynesia. Did they float? Were they in a boat that happened to get lost and the low boat finally makes it to the New World? But how does a chicken get lost from Polynesia to South America? No, somebody took that chicken in a cage on a boat on a long trip. And that's how it got from Polynesia to South America. So what I'm just saying to you is that in this kind of understanding the biology of these animals, you begin to get a bigger picture of where they fit in human society. Now, it's not just pigs and chickens with the bamboo seed crop. This is a dump rat from right outside the Leidy laboratory. Excuse me, this individual was from my house here in Costa Rica, but the point is that this exactly looks like the dump rats that you have right there. It's the same species, comes from China and India and Southeast Asia. And the striking thing about these guys is that they can live on almost nothing, bits of scraps of nothing, and have just 1 or 2 kids in the litter until you give them a lot of food. And then suddenly they make 5 or 6 kids in one shot, very fast, and reproduce very fast. They obviously got around the world associated with humans. And it's not the white rat that you all probably know, that's the Wistar rat, which comes from a different species, Rattus norvegicus, which also lives in inner cities. But these guys, there's an old Indian poetry literature talking about famines that occur the year after a bamboo seed crop in India. To put this in some kind of scale, there are statements about bamboo seed crops in India, which read, if think of it as Philadelphia covered 6 inches deep in bamboo seeds in 1 year. Think of that amount of rice and wheat. And then what would the rats do to that? They build up in enormous numbers on this huge quantity of food. And then the food's gone the next year. And what do these enormous number of rats do in the next year? They go everywhere and they eat all your crops. And so you lose all your rice crops, and that generates the famine. So what you had was a human sociological phenomenon taking place as a consequence of a natural occurrence, which was the buildup of seed predators on the huge mass seeding semelparous bamboo seed crops. And of course, humans are not idiots. This is New Delhi, and I talked to these people about their understanding of bamboo seed crops, and the eyes light up, and immediately they point out that in a year in which the bamboo seed crops nearby, and the bamboo nearby actually seed, everybody takes gunny sacks and goes out in the countryside and collects sacks of basically wild rice seeds. Okay, now it's not wild rice in the sense of what you buy in the grocery store here, but it's basically wild bamboo seeds, which they then treat just like rice. Okay. So we have the humans as another kind of predator. Now, in the same environment where these bamboo seed crops are, we have other kinds of pheasants. Family Phasianidae is the family of the chicken. So chickens are called bamboo fowls, but there are other pheasants in the same forest. This is one called a tragopan, and these do not respond the way the chickens do. The adult tragopan will go and eat a few seeds, but it doesn't suddenly turn into an egg-producing, kid-producing machine. It's a peacock, is a pheasant, Phasianidae. This is a mom peacock over here on the right side, and these are the kids. And the difference is these kids have to have insects as food. Chicken kids do fine on pure rice. So the chicken kids do fine in the pure bamboo seed crop. But all these wild Phasianids, the kids have to have insects. So they don't go and build up. Now the adults, whatever number, if there's 10 adult peacocks living in the vicinity of a bamboo seed crop, they'll all go and eat bamboo seeds, of course, but they don't turn into population explosion. This is a ringneck pheasant, just like you can see right outside, right off campus in the graveyard that's nearby or along the railroad tracks. That's a male and a female there. And these are Phasianids from, again, Southeast Asia that were introduced for hunting to the United States back in the 1800s. And they, again, the same thing. They can become quite abundant in cornfields and rice fields. When I was in high school, the daily bag limit was 18. And I usually on weekends filled that bag limit with my 18 pheasants. And we could only shoot males. We couldn't shoot females. So you had to be good at knowing which was which as it flew up in front of you. But this was part of my growing up wild meat that we survived on. And but the point is, these are an introduced animal that everybody likes. And it's the kind of animal that if it was doing something bad to people, we would all call an invasive species. Well, this is an invasive species. It's all over the United States, extremely common. But everybody likes them because they like to eat them. Okay. So all of a sudden, it's not called an invasive species. It's called an introduced species. Okay. There are other pheasants. This is a golden pheasant here. These are silver pheasants fighting with each other. Notice this is a cockfight, just like between two rooster chickens, except this is what they do to each other, what the males of any Phasianids do to each other. But these, again, do not, the kids require insects as food. So they are very slow growing. You can't produce a large quantity of them, and just putting a lot of rice out does not get you a big population of either of these kinds of pheasants. But there's other animals there who also zip in and start to eat the seeds, but do not go into that reproductive mode. This is a Southeast Asian African porcupine. They just love seeds like grain. And everyone that's there will go and eat these things, but probably have kids once every 2 years. I mean, once every 1 to 2 years. So they're not, again, not a reproducing machine. You know who this guy is? This is a very frail, you can see the post right here, which keeps him from getting to me where I actually am. He's a very fun animal. He loved to eat apples out of my hand. You could just put an apple right there. And, but that's who he is. Now, there are gory stories from the 1800s of people shooting one of these guys and counting 500 mangoes in the stomach. 500 mangoes. Now think about how much grain that would represent. So this is basically a huge vacuum cleaner. And then there are reports in the 1800s of 1,000 of these in one bamboo seed crop. Now they weren't in India. They were not. They were not reproducing, turning themselves into a population explosion of rhinoceri. But the whole simple point was that they were able to eat a large quantity. So these are the things that the bamboos have to satiate, along with the chickens, the mice, the pigs, those guys who go into a reproductive mode. This is India for a long, long time. There's a guy had actually counted 500 of these in one bamboo seed crop. But we're talking, when I say one bamboo seed crop, we're not talking about 3 acres. We're talking about literally thousands of square kilometers of one clone of one species of bamboo. Wild cattle will do exactly the same thing. Not reproduce, but get a nice full stomach and eat a lot of those seeds. The rock dove, which you know very well, what you call pigeons, would move in on a bamboo seed crop by large numbers. Weaver birds, think of, this is from Africa, these are the size of an English sparrow. Think of 10,000 of these in one flock arriving at a bamboo seed crop. And the passenger pigeon, of course, is the most famous one from North America. So you talk about, let's say, 3 million birds in one place. Now they weren't believed to be, or aren't recorded to be, focused on our bamboo. That comes in a minute. But they ate acorns. One passenger pigeon would hold 6 acorns in his crop. So when they talk about the synchronized oak tree seeding, which is about 2 to 3 year intervals, they talk about a flock of 1 million of these birds descending on an oak forest, which was 6 inches deep in acorns. And then, of course, for 2 years would have none. So the point is, any single tree that was out of phase with that would get taken by the squirrels, by the deer, and probably by bears. I don't know what other animals they eat acorns, but the whole point is chipmunks, mice, all these things, and there were insect seed predators who were cycling on a 2 year and a 3 year cycle as well. They would go dormant for 2 years or 3 years, and then all come out betting on hitting that year of the acorn crop. But again, that's heteroparous. The oak tree is not going to die. Okay. And parrots. We had enormous flocks of the Carolina parakeet all over the southeastern United States. We had one species of bamboo from the Atlantic coast all the way across to the Mississippi River. You heard it referred to as a cane brake. The cane was a 7 year, 6 year, I can't remember exactly, 8 year cycling bamboo, which is the croplands of the southern eastern United States today. But that soil was perfect for these enormous pure stands. And this was the seed predator, who is now extinct. And the striking thing to me is the bird people talk about these as going extinct because we cut down all the old growth forest and these guys nested inside of hollow trees, old hollow trees. But what I see is if you take all their food supply away, What are they going to eat? No matter what kind of trees are there. And these guys were specialists on bamboo seed crops. And it's just like the passenger pigeon, who were specialists on acorns. You take their oak forest away, and people say, well, we want to bring back the passenger pigeon. Well, you got to bring back the enormous oak forests that we used to have, which we don't have anymore, of course. Now, this phenomenon is not only bamboo. I mean, I've already mentioned things like salmon and the mayflies and you know, that sort of thing. But there's in Sri Lanka, there is a genus of plants called Strobilanthes that this entire photograph is one species of Strobilanthes. There's everything green in that photograph is a shrub. And this is what it looks like close up. These are juveniles. They would be probably, let's just say out of my head here, 6 years old, headed for 8 years. This species, there are a number of species, but this species headed for 8 years to flower and seed and die, just like the salmon. And this are the ones I have photographs of. This is the white flowers that go with it, 8 years. This is the flowers close up. But this is what you can see today. This is a different species that's on a 12-year cycle. And you could have 10,000 hectares of this purple flower all in one shot, 12 years. And then for 11 years, nothing, just growing. Now, these are all bee pollinated. Where are you going to get the bees after 12 years, after 11 years with no flowers? Where are the bees going to come from? Oh, this is after they flower and die, all right? So the stems are up there and the juvenile, the seedlings are down here. Okay, here I am in Malaysia, and I knew about these bees, and I always been curious about them because there's old literature that describes the bees visiting those Strobilanthes flowers. So I'm out in the forest with a local guy, and I'm talking to him about it. And he says, oh, I can show you some nests of Apis dorsata. So we go to see the nests. So here they are. There's my first photograph right there. That's a beehive, a wax beehive constructed by the bees on the stem, and another one right here. So I only have this one photograph. I took this picture, and then I said to the guy, I said, is there any way I can get any closer? Sure, he said, sure, we can climb the tree. We can go up the tree. So me and my innocence, I walk over to the base of the tree. He strips his leather shoes off, drops them at the bottom of the tree, and starts climbing the tree barefoot. So me, Westerner, I go up the tree behind him. And all of a sudden, he says, oh, jump. And I turn around and look, and I'm, I don't know, 10 feet off the ground, you know, the height of a basketball hoop, more or less. But the urgency in his voice said, jump. So I did. And I don't know, I don't think I sprained anything, but I hit the ground. And he hit the ground right next to me running. So I ran after him. So I don't know, 100 meters out, he stopped, I stopped. And he said, well, I think we can go back now and get my shoes. So we go back to the base of the tree, and there's no bees, but his shoes are sitting there at the bottom of the tree, and the shoes are all the soft inner side of the shoes is a dense velvet of bee stings. And what happened is these bees felt the vibrations of us starting to climb the tree. This is a big tree, starting to climb the tree, and went into full attack mode. And it turns out that if you're going to beehive and you're going to live in a world that's got bee nest predators, the only way you stay alive is that way, is to be extremely aggressive to anything near the nest. What really struck me about Africa is that Africa is full of primates and mustelids and small carnivores who are specialists on bee nests, which gives rise to extreme aggression in the old world bees. But it's more than that. These are the bees who migrate. So these nests could have been built in the last week. They migrate to where the flowers are, build a nest, and go through your production and do all the things that bees do while the flowers are there. And then they leave. So then we go back to this again. So it turns out that there were missionaries in India in the 1800s who kept a family Bible. And in the family Bible, they recorded the flowering of the Strobilanthes that was near the species that was near their houses. So we have these very nice records that show that every 8 years or every 12 years or whatever it was, this particular species of Strobilanthes flowered on right near. But along with it, they comment that very large numbers of colonies of bees show up in that year. And all the bears migrate to where the beehives are, so that the bears are preying on the beehives. So the beehives that survive are ones that are on cliff faces that are too steep for the bears to be able to climb. And that's Apis dorsata, the same Apis that was there in Malaysia that was being very, very aggressive to me. And of course, what you're seeing is that if you've got these kinds of predators who will come after your migratory things, which are fully exposed nests, not inside a hollow tree trunk or anything protected like that, then you've got to be very, very aggressive. Well, but we have more than that. This is rice. Same Malaysia. This is rice, you know, it's a grass, right? And so those are the grass seeds or the rice grains, all that. Now grass is wind pollinated. And of course, the rice farmer doesn't have to have bees. More than that, if you're trying to keep bees alive and you go and you buy grass pollen, which bees use pollen for their protein from all kinds of flowers, to feed your bees, they'll die. Bees cannot survive on grass pollen, including your honeybee. But guess what? See that bee right there? That's an Apis dorsata collecting pollen from the grass, the rice grain flowers. And it turns out that this bee is able to live off grass pollen, which is what you use as, what the bee uses as basically starvation food between those big fruiting, big flowering crops. So when there's a big flowering crop, they're using those flowers like Strobilanthes and perhaps some others. But when a bamboo crop goes off, I'll bet you they collect that bamboo pollen as well. And now they go out and they collect pollen from the farmer's rice field, which is nothing more than a huge wind pollinated flower crop. And you don't ever see any other bees inside of a rice field, no matter where you are, because they can't use grass pollen. But that bee right there, I know is Apis dorsata because that's what I do, all right? So I know it is, but you can see the very bright white and black rings on the abdomen and the orange color of the thorax. And then the very black head up here in the front. That's the opposite of being cryptic. That's warning colors. That's saying, I am a very aggressive and very bad bee. Not only am I individually aggressive and big, but also I will go back to the nest and get the rest of the bees and we will all attack you, right? Now, this is a bee comb from inside a tree here in Costa Rica, here near our house. And these are Apis mellifera, which is the African version of Apis dorsata. Apis dorsata, Southeast Asia. Apis mellifera in Africa. And Africa is full of wasp and bee nest predators, primates and mustelids, and probably others as well. Now, so when you walk around in an African forest, you don't see bee nests like you do here. I mean, the New World Project is full of bee nests. They're everywhere, all kinds. Well, a Brazilian scientist, one of our guild, back in about 1920, something like that, 25, decided that these African Apis mellifera, which same species as the European honeybee, would be a good thing to introduce to the New World because it makes very copious amounts of wax. So he brought them to Brazil, and of course a technician in his laboratory left the door open and they escaped. So these so-called Africanized, they're called Africanized bees, but in fact what they are is the African bee, has then gradually migrated up through South America, Central America, and is now in southern Texas. And they are very, very aggressive. So when the wave of bees went through Costa Rica back 15 years ago or so, maybe it was a little longer than that, there were horse deaths, there were people deaths, there were really fierce attacks of people who made the mistake of being anywhere near one of these wild bee nests. And this is what the comb is that comes out of the hollow tree in this particular case. And these things right here are the cells where the nest is making queen bees. So it's making virgin queens in those cells. And then these are for the worker bees. Okay. Now, humans, for hundreds and hundreds of years, have domesticated Apis mellifera in Europe. So out of Africa into Europe, and select for more docile bees. So here's a Apis mellifera colony here in Costa Rica. And you notice he doesn't have any protective stuff on him, nothing on his head, just a bit of narcotic smoke right here to keep the bees calm. These are European bees maintained in Costa Rica for honey, for domestic honey. When the Africanized bee from South America get up to here, the males are more aggressive than the males of the domestic bee here. So the males then end up mating with the virgin females and you get hybrids. So today, if you go and find, this is a picture of mine from the 60s. If you go to a beekeeper today, you will find in Costa Rica, you'll find it in a suit, a protective suit, and his beehives will not be right next door to the house. They will be out in some isolated place where people, children, dogs, horses, and neighbors don't bump into them because they're very, very quick to attack. They can be used and they make more honey than the domestic bee does, but it's the same species of bee, but it was domesticated in Europe and brought from Europe to here. Whereas the Africanized bee came from Africa directly to Brazil and has come as a wild animal moving all the way up through, and it's all the way to the southern United States now. So, and like I say, that's a hybrid. So here's what as you can see, I mean, he's totally casual about it. This would be me in high school, working with bees in northern Minnesota. For a summer, I did nothing but this. And the point is that as long as you don't bang the comb and upset the bees, especially if you use a bit of smoke to narcoticize the bees, then they can be handled just as you see here. You could never do this with an Africanized bee colony. You could never handle it like this with your hands open and your body open. You'd be stung multiple times. And that's it, folks, for what I wanted you to understand about. So I'm going to go back to here just for a second. and just emphasize that piece of the conservation aspect or component of this is these phenomena of 10,000 hectares of seeding bamboo, of 1 million wildebeests, of streams crammed with salmon, the mayflies choking the stream with their adults every 3 years. All of that is now gone, and we will never have it back. We won't ever have the passenger pigeon back. So the irony in here is that is what's possible. I'm not saying that's what we have to have and kill ourselves to create again. In fact, we probably can't ever do that. Humans will not give the planet back to the wild world. No matter how clever we are and how gentle we are with it, we won't ever really give the whole thing back. Of course we won't. But we can have pieces of that, and where there are still pieces of it surviving, they are worthwhile keeping in the system. Now, the other kind of thing is they are themselves fascinating in their biologies, their genetics of the whole timing aspect. How does the biology of an organism come to be highly synchronized? And I can explain to you how they figured out the bamboo counts purely by accident. Duke University had a thing called a synchrotron, which was an enormous greenhouse, which had partitioned into different pieces. And in the different pieces in the greenhouse, they had bamboo growing under different light and dark conditions. How many hours of daylight, how many hours of night, and so on. And there was a partition full of bamboo, which had been sort of abandoned. Nobody's paying any attention to it. And the partition next to it, separated by a glass wall, was put onto a schedule of 3 months long day length, 3 months short day length. Now, what have I just did? I've just mimicked a northern winter. So what's a northern winter? 6 months of short day length, and short day length, and summer is 6 months of long day length, well, roughly, okay? So that was cycling in the partition next door. And an alert gardener, keeper of the greenhouse of the synchrotron, noticed that the wild bamboo, being just ignored next door, suddenly flowered. Not when it was supposed to. It turned out to be, I forgot, it was like, say, a 17-year species, and it flowered after 7 years or after 8 years, something like that. And somebody realized that the 3 months short night and 3 months long night mimicked 1 year of cycle. And it turns out that is what the bamboo counts. So each time it goes through a long day period and a short day period, it racks up 1 year. So if it's going to count for 17 years, that's how it gets to 17 years. Now, the striking thing about that is that I suddenly realized when I saw that result, whoa, there are no highly synchronized bamboos right on the equator. And what's peculiar about the equator? It has 3 months short, 3 months long, 3 months short, 3 months long, as the sun goes back and forth. So it doesn't have the nice long synchronies that the subtropics do. And all the synchronized bamboos, South China, India, Malaysia, the southern United States, they're all in the subtropics, which have quite distinctive summers and quite distinctive winters by their day lengths. So in the overall biology of this, there's about 200 species of bamboos around the world that do this kind of thing. Of those 200, I think maybe only 1 or 2 are anywhere near the actual equator, which of course then means that they can't be part of vegetation structure on the equator. Or if they are, they're acting more like ordinary grasses rather than like bamboos. Okay, so we'll stop with that. That's where we are today. And we have already parked on Canvas the slides for the Thursday lecture as well. Okay. So that's there, as is the one reading as well. Okay, so I'm going to stop, and we're all done for now.